Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls, and cars and trucks up and down Interstate 5s and all ships at sea. Stand by, because here he is, Dan Perkins. He's a political commentator, host of What's on My Mind podcast, very popular. He's an author, historical romance writer called Sad Eyes, Volume 1 and 2. He has danperkins.guru and Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us, which is an outreach to veterans, which he does a wonderful job there. And I don't know if his special time is pickleball or cornhole. Which one is it, Dan?
I don't know either.
How are you, buddy? Good to see you.
Good, thank you. It's a pleasure always to be with you, sir.
Oh yeah, you're fun to have. All right. There is this negotiation going on between Russia and the United States. And even Saudi Arabia is going to get involved. What's your take on the forming of a summit to end the war in Ukraine?
It's fascinating to me. I have worked in the private sector in money for 50 years, and I've built investment products. I manage money even today for people. But one of the things that I did is I did consulting on structuring deals. And what you're seeing going on right now is that the two principals, Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump, are having casual conversations, but each have sent representatives to Saudi Arabia to meet with the person who is the broker of this deal, and that's the Crown Prince. That team of people from both sides and the intermediary, the Crown Prince, are trying to work out the terms and conditions of a deal so that when Mr. Trump and Mr. Putin sit down at the table, they're going to sign a document for peace or whatever it's going to be that was pre-negotiated by their underlings. That's the way it works. And that's what was not happening with Joe Biden. He was totally in control of the messaging, and as a result, never really appointed anybody to act on his behalf to try and deal with the Ukrainian situation. How many times did you see that our Secretary of State made any trips to Ukraine? Hardly ever. Who did the Biden administration send to talk to the Russians? Nobody. Russia was evil. So there was never the framework for the possibility of discussions to ending this ungodly war until Trump came in and brought the art of the deal concept by putting underlings that he trusted to go and speak on his behalf, and Putin did the same thing. And that's why you're seeing all of a sudden progress, is because they understand they need a third party, in this case, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who has leverage in both places. His leverage over the Russians is he controls a huge percentage of the oil market, and he can change the price, which will adversely affect the Russian economy. So he's got leverage at the table. And so when the negotiator has leverage, both sides listen, and that's what's going on.
Wow, fascinating. Do you find it also very interesting that the EU is uninvited?
Yes. I was going to say no, but I thought about it for a second. The EU is become extremely fractured. We saw what happened in Germany when the vice president was there, and what the German government's doing. The raids that the German government did over the weekend with a person who used the internet to send out a unflattering cartoon about the German government, and he was arrested, and his computer and his cell phone was taken, and they said if he sent it out to anybody and they forwarded it on as a follow-on, they could be arrested. So and then we have Margaret Brennan, the ace reporter, who's trying to convince the Secretary of State that free will and free speech cause the determination of the direction of the Hitler organization and its persecution and murder of Jews. And then he came back and really pounded her pretty politely, but and she had nothing to say afterwards. So Europe is in chaos, and part of Europe is going left, other part of Europe's going right. There's not apparently a strong leader in any country that has, perhaps with Poland, but most of the European countries have very weak leadership in their governments, and nobody wants to step up to be the leader to cause change to take place in Europe.
It took the return of Trump for America to realize that we have been paying for Europeans' protection for years.
Yeah.
And they've only been paying 2%. We've been bugging them to pay 5%. They're squawking at it, and they have the audacity to criticize us when they have been safe because of us.
Yeah, both with our spending and our military troops and all the armaments there. Again, just for perspective, Perry, all of this has taken place in 28 days.
Yeah.
28 days.
Yeah.
And it's because America has a leader who has a clear vision of what he wants to do, not only to make America great again, but to recapitalize and reinvent the world economies. And I think that that's extremely important. But Joe Biden was never, ever going to be able to do that. He tried to do that by giving away hundreds of billions of dollars on stupid stuff that the American people didn't know about. And there's lots more we don't know. I mean, two interesting numbers came out last week. Mm-hmm. 800,000 people are on the Social Security rolls who are not citizens and have false identification, and they've done nothing about it. We have now and I heard a little bit of your previous interview, but we have 20 million people who Social Security says who are over the age of 100, when the census says we have 73 million. So that we've got people that are supposedly in the 139 to 142 year age bracket.
Right.
It's insane. And we're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars of waste that we wrote checks. Our government, Social Security, wrote checks for these 20 million people who were no longer around. They were cashed by probably family members, and they did nothing about it. And they get a notification from the Vital Statistics Bureau of how many people died and who they were, name and address. They never took them off the rolls.
Yeah.
And the question, I'm sorry, but just one more point. A question I want answered, and Musk is the gentleman to do that. I'm not afraid of the answer. I think there are many, many Democrats who are afraid of the answer. Do you remember when we had a vice president, Al Gore, who said the Social Security lockbox? Mm-hmm. Well, that Social Security lockbox has been destroyed. I want to know how much money was taken out of the Social Security Trust Fund and went to the general operation of the government. I want to know how much is there. And I'm going to tell you, it's going to be in the trillions of dollars. And I love the conversation that you had with your previous guest, because he's saying, wait a minute, if we get rid of all the fraud, or as much as we possibly can, we may be able to live within our budget.
Yeah.
In Social Security. And I think that's a real possibility.
Okay, let me ask one other quick question about Ukraine, and then I'll take it back because I want to get more into Doge. But do you think the Ukraine deal being brokered by the Crown Prince, here comes Putin, here comes Trump, mm-hmm. and here comes Zelensky, do you think it includes some kind of a real estate swap or bargain?
I don't know. The idea that Trump wants to redevelop Gaza is a fascinating idea, because if you've seen any pictures of the destruction of the Gaza Strip, if you're going to go in there and try and fix one building at a time, it'll take forever to get it done. he wants to move the people out, bring in the bulldozers, and just level everything, get rid of the unexploded bombs, everything, fill up the tunnels, make it nice, all nice and flat, and start building. And I think they could bring it back much quicker in maybe 7 to 10 years, and that people could come back and resettle. But I just think that I don't know that there's the peace will be done on basically a real estate deal.
Yeah.
The same kind of thing has to be. Look at the pictures of Ukraine. It's been leveled by all bombing of the Russians, and I don't see how you can put people back in those conditions, because it'll be so dangerous. So they need to bring in the bulldozers and run that one down.
Doesn't the Ukraine deal include portions of the upper east side of Ukraine? I mean, that's always been a burr in the saddle, so to speak, to Russia. They want those territories up there. Do you think that's part of the deal?
It could be, because Vice President Vance said last week when he was in Europe, he said, if you're thinking that we're going to go back to the pre-war borders, that ain't going to happen. Okay.
All right. Let me take a quick break. Check out Dan, a couple of websites, danperkins.guru. Check out his podcast, On My Mind podcast, his outreach to veterans, songs and stories for soldiers.us. And he has some great historical romance novels out there called Sad Eyes, Volume 1 and Volume 2. You can Google those and get a little bit of a feel of Dan's offside. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back. Always a delight to have Dan Perkins with us, political commentator, host of What's on My Mind podcast. He also writes historic novels or romance. You can check it out, Sad Eyes, Volume 1 and 2. Dan does have his own website, danperkins.guru, and he has an outreach to veterans. It's just terrific, songs and stories for soldiers.us. Dan, I think we're all sitting back watching the uncover of fraud at amazement. I mean, we knew that there was problems. We had no idea that it was this widespread and so deep. I mean, our brains are on tilt when you see these numbers. I do hope as they explain these numbers that they equate it to something so us average people can understand it a little bit better. When you're talking billions and trillions, all of a sudden your mind just kind of goes blank. But that's how much they're finding. As they uncover this, you can't help but believe there's kickbacks. And that list of kickbacks could be more embarrassing than Epstein's list.
No question. No question. Let me give you an example. We could talk about Nancy Pelosi and her husband and how they traded the market based on information that she got. I don't want to do that. But the famous senator from Massachusetts, which I think I was the first to call her Pocahontas before Donald Trump, but when she came into Congress, she had a net worth of $175,000. Based on the most recent financial disclosure, she's approaching $12 million. And her salary wouldn't equate to the ability to raise that much net worth in the time that she's been at the Senate. But it's not just her. It's all over. We have people who have come in modest and leave wealthy people. The money is flowing, and one of the disappointments that I have is that Musk can't look at Congress because there's a different branch of the government, and he's employed by the president, who is in charge of the executive branch. But I think that the House and Senate have both established subcommittees to begin the process. And I'm older than you. I can't count on enough fingers and toes the number of times in my life that I've heard both Republican and Democratic presidential candidates talking about we got to reduce the size of government, we got to reduce the budget, and nobody ever did it. Now, Bill Clinton laid off 265,000 people and reduced the budget by 12%. and he actually was the last time we ever had a balanced budget, which was somewhat a false narrative, but at least claimed since then. And so we have people who have no responsibility to the people who provide the tax money. And that's what's going on. And so I keep asking myself, why is it, what happened that when Donald Trump made the same promise that a lot of other people have made to get rid of waste and corruption in the federal government and bring it down to a manageable size?
I think there's a clear answer to that. He's not a politician. He's a CEO. He didn't become a billionaire by waste.
Agreed. And speaking of CEO, did you happen to see the attack on Jamie Dimon by about 695 out of his 300,000 employees, who said, "You got to let us work from home. It's the right thing to do." And he said, I can't say on the air what his words were, but it was basically the F-bomb, you got a job, you come into the office. If you don't have a job. And I think that's also a reflection of what we went through and the price we paid for the way our government handled COVID. And we're still paying the price. And our children have not seen any real major catch-up of how far behind they were by what we did in COVID under the Biden administration. So all of these things are happening. And I think in hindsight, I know a lot of people will be really angry with me when I say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it was a good thing that Donald took a sabbatical of 4 years from the presidency. Because I think he used that time to really plan what he was going to do, and he knew how he was going to do it, who he was going to do it with, and he hit the ground running. And he didn't use the government accounting office to pay for his transition. He paid for it. And I think you're seeing why he's accomplished so much in 28 days.
Yeah, it's amazing. And this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
As this comes out and the shock and awe of it settles down, and then all of a sudden we realize how much we've been had, it'll play out. It's got an amazing life to it. I want to switch your attention for a moment, Dan, over to Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. He announced yesterday an investigation into the botched Afghan withdrawal. This could be significant. So let me preface this question by saying this. To your point, where the president was out of office for 4 years, he was attacked with lawfare unlike anybody we've ever seen, and he even had to dodge a couple of bullets. I mean, they obviously wanted him gone. He's had 4 years to think about, if he got reelected, what he would do. And instead of him doing it, he's put a team together to do it. And they're unwinding this thing at a level and a rate unlike anything we've ever seen, only to indicate the fraud and the cover-up and the disdain that has been there for years. The Afghan withdrawal was one of the worst we've ever seen. What do you think could come of this investigation?
Well, I probably have written more about that particular event than anything in my commentaries in the last several years. What we had was a decision was made by the president that the withdrawal from Afghanistan was going to be controlled by the State Department. Many people don't know this. It wasn't the Pentagon who was in charge of it. The State Department was in charge of the withdrawal. The State Department made the decision to leave the $95 billion worth of arms on the ground and do nothing about them. The State Department gave up the opportunity to have security for that airport, and they made the decision. So that when we decided to come out, and we tried to pull out during the middle of the night, and we had thousands and thousands of people. You know, I remember, and I'm sure you do too, you remember the shooting in Tiananmen Square, where the protester was shot by the soldier at point blank range. When that person who was hanging on to that C-130 trying to take off, and went up into the air, and then the wind knocked him off the plane, and he fell to the earth. That was the Tiananmen Square moment for me about the withdrawal from Afghanistan. It was not enough people have been fired or prosecuted for that event, in my opinion.
Okay, so I guess what we'll see from this is bad policy, bad decision making, stuff that was done in the past. And I think we need to know this. It's kind of like uncovering what really happened in January 7th. I think the committee will unwind that. You will see all of this. The president seems to be saying to his team, clean that up. I'm going to concentrate on moving forward. I mean, that's kind of the 30,000-foot view that I see.
Sure.
But let me just lean on your budget brain just for a moment. We still are fighting inflation from various reasons. Some will blame tariffs, some will blame chicken flu. I don't know. But the point being is we probably won't see all of this settling down for maybe a couple of quarters. Do you think that's right?
Yes. Understand that an incumbent for the presidency tries to drive the economy as hard as he possibly can prior to the midterm election, or his reelection in this case. And so it's very common to see billions of dollars being spread out all over the country to try and to get projects started, to put people to work, to get people feel positive about what's going on, so that the momentum goes to the president, the incumbent, so he can be reelected. That's what happened here. We have an economy where inflation is coming back. Interest rates, as your previous guest pointed, were going higher, and they are. And so we're paying now for the abuse of the last 2 years that Biden did everything within his power from an economic standpoint to try and win re-election. Unfortunately, it wasn't re-election for him. It was re-election or election for Kamala, and that didn't work. So now Trump is left with the mess that all of the excess spending and all the boondoggles that were part of the Biden last 2 years of their administration were trying to get reelected for 4 more years, didn't work. But we have to pay the consequences until we can get it fixed.
By the way, that's always been a method of theirs. Let's make it messy for the next person, then we can blame them. Yeah, I understand that. But this time it backfired because the people, it was such a mandate that we don't want to go this way anymore. So,
yeah, you had the American people complaining about, of all things, the price of eggs. Yeah. How many times did you see stories in the mainstream media or on alternative media? Americans were talking about $6, $7, $8, $9, $10 for a dozen eggs, and that when the American people started talking about not Ukraine, but they couldn't afford to buy the food that they wanted because the prices were too damn high. Yeah, that's when the thing turned.
All right, brother, got to go. Good to see you. You're looking good.
Thank you.
I don't know how much older than you are than me, but keep blazing the trail because I'm not too far behind.
Yeah, I'll be 80 in July.
All right, check it out. danperkins.guru. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us. Check out his podcast, What's on My Mind podcast. Check that out. And read one of his novels, Sad Eyes. Go online and pick it up and read it. Sad Eyes by Dan Perkins. Good to see you, buddy. God bless.
Thank you. Take care, sir.